Hey there, thank you for joining us on Coffee Talk with the Experts. Today we have one of the leading consulting service providers for CPA firms. With me virtually is the Chief Innovation Officer at Boomer Consulting, Marc Staut. Marc helps meet the growing needs of CPA firms by leveraging his experience to provide strategic technology assessments, planning, visioning, and coaching. Welcome, Marc.
Thanks for having me here virtually, Chris.
So we've got a lot of movement, a lot of changes taking place in the market, a lot of anxiety, and hopefully working with you today, we can dive into some of these challenges and get your perspective on how firms can tackle them. Jumping right into it, what do firms need to know about outsourcing?
Well, there's a lot going on with outsourcing right now. It is probably the #1 topic that people are asking me about. And it really doesn't matter what size of firm it is. Outsourcing used to be something that the largest firms were really focused on as a way to scale, as a way to save money, lots of different reasons for that. But right now, every firm is looking into outsourcing. Even if it's something that they had tried before, they're coming back to it and they're being pushed into this because of the lack of talent in the marketplace. They have more work than they can actually manage at this particular point, and they're trying to find ways to get that work done. And so thinking a little bit outside the box or outside their comfort zone, outsourcing is a pretty logical conclusion for them.
Totally agree. And we're hearing it from large, small, and medium companies across the country. What types of outsourcing are firms looking at?
You know, it's funny you ask that, Chris, because there are so many different types. Oftentimes when you say outsourcing, people immediately think of offshoring. They think of, an office that has a whole bunch of people that maybe speak the same language, maybe don't, and they're thinking just completely around the world kind of deal. And it's really more than that. There is, of course, offshoring. That is definitely one of the options that are there, whether it is through India or the Philippines. But there's also ways of, instead of just picking up the work and sending it out, you can actually leverage some of the outsourcing companies to bring talent into your company. So they will embed people with your team. They interact with your team. You get to know them. You train them on the way that you want things done. And that's a huge opportunity there. We see that coming out of South Africa quite a bit as well. But there's other types even beyond that. So there's onshoring, offshoring. The onshoring aspect of it, you can actually outsource and people will do the work for you, but it never crosses international borders, which is a comfort level for some people. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of the aspects of that in a little while. But don't forget, there's also consulting. There is part-time work. There is gig work. There's short-term contract work and long-term contract work. All of those are encapsulated under outsourcing. And you can see why it's such a powerful topic right now.
Absolutely, and especially globalization. It's becoming a trend now. And how is this causing firms to change their mindset?
Well, it's really interesting. When you think about globalization, there are some real opportunities there, right? Looking outside of your own backyard, and whether that is looking, onto a different coast or the Midwest, that's one opportunity. But if you think a little bit broader and you think about going to different time zones, different countries, there's some real opportunities to kind of follow the sun. So work can continue to happen. They'll still be a part of your team, or maybe it's just something that you've sent off, but work happens while you sleep. Now, because there are so many firms that are highly leveraged during the busiest times of year, this can really be an advantage for them. Now, there's some challenges there too. When you start adding in other time zones, you have to adjust a little bit. Maybe the US-based team is going to stay a little longer or come in a little earlier, or maybe your international team is going to do that. The other thing to think about with globalization from a pure technology perspective is it's not the same experience when you are 13,000 miles away. All of a sudden, the latency becomes more of the issue than the actual bandwidth that is available. So even if you are working in a country that is fairly well developed, they have really good internet, the latency just to get information back and forth may be something that you need to factor in, which is why a lot of people are starting to look at the Azure virtual desktops. because of those Azure on-ramps, as it were, in different countries. They can actually get on kind of the superhighway and have a better technology experience.
And we're seeing that across the board, especially the larger firms that have the time and to invest into looking to offshoring. But what about compliance and regulatory challenges? How are firms responding to them, and how are they maintaining compliance and the trust with their customers?
Yeah, you know, before we get to that, that's a great question, Chris, and I want to go back to that. But something you just said right there about the larger firms are doing that. The larger firms, in most cases, have had virtual environments for a while. It's been kind of their secret sauce. That's how they've had mobile workers. That's how they've been able to handle remote workers. In general, it was a very easy transition for them during the pandemic because they just needed to scale the existing environments. Some of the smaller firms did not have that. They were still using VPNs and other tools for people to work remotely. And because of the pandemic, those smaller firms have gotten into, hey, what is it that I'm doing from a virtual desktop infrastructure standpoint, whether it's VMware or Citrix or Azure. There's different options that are out there, though they are starting to all gravitate more towards Azure virtual desktops right now because it is so integrated with the systems they already have. But we're seeing a definite uptick in all firms looking at a virtual desktop methodology for handling people who may never come into the office. They may never be there. So they're saying, hey, yeah, use your home computer and access our virtual environment because we have stricter controls over that. And that kind of now ties into what you were asking about, about the compliance and regulatory challenges. That probably scares firms away from outsourcing more than any other thing. The 7216 or the data standards can be really intimidating, really kind of hard to get your head around. Though, if you think about it as, hey, we want to protect the data and we just want to make sure that the data stays with us and stays in our own environment, that's really the first step towards doing that. And again, that leads back into that virtual environment.
It sounds like having a robust cloud solution or something that the firm can control, they can set the standards, set the security protocols, et cetera, is a definite need to leverage overseas talent and expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a definite competitive advantage for anybody who has those in the cloud as opposed to building them yourself. Citrix and VMware were the two players in that space for a very long time, but they are expensive. They are difficult to maintain. The minute you have them optimized, they start to degrade. So it takes a lot of time and effort. If you move those over into the cloud, then all of a sudden you have much more speed and agility and scalability that can really let you leverage the opportunities in outsourcing much faster.
Outside of compliance and regulatory challenges, what about the security of outsourcing? A lot of firms are, especially the firm administrators, are concerned about access to the all-important, their data, their clients' data from outside of the country or even just outside of the company because they are outsourcing. How are they protecting the data?
In one of the biggest challenges is a lot of firms have not gone with leased rights for accessing files. And I understand why. If you started out with everything open, like anybody can jump in and see any client, that gives a lot of flexibility. Our teams can help each other out. Our different offices can help each other out. I understand the reasoning for that. And it's really hard to move towards a leased rights perspective. And when I say leased rights, that means that no matter who you are, you only access the clients that you need to access. You do not have access to clients you're not working on. If you're in that type of an environment, security becomes super easy. You simply assign the appropriate clients to the appropriate people through the virtual infrastructure in most cases, and the data never leaves. You have a really good understanding of who's accessing it and who's signed off to be able to access it. If you don't have that type of environment, though, then it becomes a little bit more challenging. And we're starting to see firms segregate their data and say, okay, we're going to kind of build a secondary data source over here, whether it's another server or a cloud storage area. And we're going to move things that the outsourcing people whether it's onshore, offshore, doesn't really matter. We're going to move things over into that category because we've had the proper sign-offs. We have an audit methodology around that. All of those things we can handle, and then we'll keep these other people kind of segregated. So it's a little bit of a hybrid approach. That isn't going to last very long because globalization is here, and outsourcing is here. It's not going away anytime soon. So it's a little bit of a stopgap approach, but that is generally how firms are handling it. This is, again, if you have an IT service provider, this is something that they can definitely help with if you don't have that expertise in-house.
And it sounds like if the firm adopts a solution like a virtual desktop, they can set up their permissions, they can set up access to which files, they can also control if files can be disseminated or downloaded locally. They have a lot more control than maybe they think they do if they're working
Absolutely.
with a provider that can give them that type of solution. What
Yep.
are some low-hanging fruit that items that firms can adopt today? Looking at outsourcing, whether you're large or small, what's some low-hanging fruit?
Yeah, I think that too many people immediately think of tax, right? And whether it's individual tax or business return tax, their conversation really stops there. They don't think about all the different ways that they could use help. And so we actually did a poll in our last outsourcing workshop. We've got another one coming up, but we did a poll of all of our attendees. And what they said was that they weren't just looking for associates or interns. They needed help at the experience level, the seniors, the manager level, doing reviews, and even some operational aspects. So thinking not just as in low-level tax people that are going to sit and kind of do busy work, but thinking about, hey, where can I really use talent? Where can I really get those opportunities? That's one aspect. And then also think about it outside of tax as more than just tax. Advisory services have huge opportunities to leverage outsourcing resources as well as audit. I think a lot of people don't think about the ability to leverage outsourcing resources to help with their assurance practices as well.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing your in-depth experience on this topic. And for those who are still with us, thank you for joining us today. Please like and subscribe below and let us know how we can help more for the latest industry tips and trends with the experts. Cheers.
Pleasure to be here, Chris. Thank you.